on, guys? I'm Aurora Peachy. I'm here at ArenaNet Studios. Yay! And we have Colin Johansson. I have some questions for my viewers this time.
Oh no.
Direct from you guys. He says, oh no. So, first one from Derar. So how stressful is it with the expansion development as opposed to the constant living world and living story updates? What's the difference as far as like stress levels and work?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I would say generally, I think that the live environment is always a more stressful thing to work on. The expansions, you have very long build cycles that lead to kind of key check-in dates where you verify where everything's at, and eventually a release date. After you go through beta testing and everything. And there are moments that are very stressful in the expansion, for sure. More in some ways more stressful than a typical live release. But I think if you're on a live team, you're just constantly responsible for the live experience in the game. And I think other than when you get to step back and let the expansion team step in and deliver, I think generally live development is always the one that's a little bit more stressful for the team. In particular, our living world strategy is one of regular content updates. And that can be something where it's like, this is the date it's going, whatever state it's in, it's got to go, and that makes it very hard, right? I think expansions have the capacity to push back if we want to. It's very hard for us to push back living world updates because then our players go, this break, it's been going forever. And we have pushed episodes before, and sometimes that has resulted in longer breaks that people have noticed, and that's just the result of we need to give this more time till it's ready. But it's something that we generally try not to do with live content if we can help it. We try to scope it small enough so we can get it right, and then not have to kill the team. That's something we're still working on. But yeah, that's a really interesting question. I would say live is definitely more stressful for the developers working on it than expansion, but both are an incredible amount of work.
Right. So what is the live team doing now? Are they working on expansion things, or do they have their secret background projects now?
Well, we've seen some stuff from them recently. I mean, the Lunar New Year's event recently was something that some folks who are working on live delivered. In January we had a balance update. Certainly the PvP live team delivered a huge update in December and is working on the major tournament series stuff that we've got going on. We have, obviously we're going to still have live things that happen between now and when the expansion launches, and so there will be other stuff that I can't talk about yet that will continue to come through. There won't be any more Living World episodes. The story of where Living World ended is exactly where the expansion picks up, and so that specific area will be looking beyond the expansion to say what happens after that, and we're really, we're not talking about that yet. We're really focused on get the expansion and the other things we're working on that come before it in really good shape.
From Gorkum asks, since the day and night cycle has it's going to be a huge part of the upcoming maps, and it really affect the dynamic events and such, are there going to be different weather conditions that influence gameplay at all?
Well, Gorkum, first off, let me say that the day-night cycle is an important part of the first map that we've talked about, and is the kind of meta story of that map. And each map has its own sort of unique major story that drives that map. And weather is not currently planned as one of the major stories that drives the experience in one of the current maps we're developing, but it certainly could be in the future. I think we have some really cool things we can do with our weather system. We've shown little bits and pieces sometimes in dynamic events around the world, and that would be a really cool thing to have drive the story of one of our maps at some point. We did a little bit of this with the sandstorm in Drytop.
Yes.
I mean, I think you could argue that the story of that map kind of was about preparing for and getting ready for, and then the sandstorm hits. More in kind of a gameplay sense than in a story sense, whereas in the jungle, those meta experiences are actually more about the story and the gameplay melded together. The first map is very much find survivors, gather them all together, and prepare to survive through the night when all the Mordrim charge into the map. And I think that's both, you get that unique gameplay experience where the story of the map has shifted, but you also get to experience the story of that. And that's what each of the maps in the expansion has kind of a core driving motivation behind it. But day-night is just the first one.
All right. So there are other weather effects won't necessarily affect gameplay or story, but will there be weather? Are there going to be rainstorms in the forest?
I don't know. We're still really doing a lot of work on weather, on the maps and what the experience will be like. So I can't say for sure right now, but I can say a major map experience will not be about weather in this expansion.
Right. Right. I love weather effects in the game. Whenever I come across a rainstorm, I'm just like, I have to stop and say, this is so cool. So seeing them in the jungle, it would be so cool. Tech427 asks, do you have a particularly fun or interesting story to tell that happened during the development of Heart of Thorns? I know that's very broad.
Fun or interesting development story. I got a kick out of John Peters playing blindfolded the other day. That was unexpected. That was pretty awesome. I guess one interesting one. So years ago we started working in the background on some of the technology that we would use to potentially build future expansions, and we had a small team that was prototyping some of the concepts and what we could do. And it's really interesting to see now some of the things that we're doing with guild halls is actually using that technology that years ago we were putting together, and that's something I thought was really cool. A lot of the work that they did, that early prototype team did, actually turned into the Edge of the Mist map, and was kind of built on that, not from a tech standpoint, but just the map that they built. That was contextually the content we used for it. But some of the tech that they were building ended up actually migrating its way into guild halls, and that's been really cool. I think another kind of fun story is a lot of our dev teams do demos every 2 weeks, where they get an opportunity to get everybody together who's excited about their team, and they take half an hour and they go into a usability rabbit and they showcase, here's all the awesome stuff we did in the last 2 weeks. And it's been really fun to watch over the last few months as it went from disparate parts to all of it starting to come together to feel like a game. I think that's one of the coolest parts of development is you feel like, the best analogy I can give is you feel like you have a giant pile of Legos on the floor, and slowly they start getting pieced together to build something. And we're really like, we've got this playable demo now where it's like, okay, I can start to see how all this stuff comes together and how masteries fit into playing the content. And more we're starting to see that across the entire expansion. And soon, in beta testing, players will get to see some of that stuff as well. And certainly that will ramp up quickly as we get more into more beta testing. But that's just fun for me to watch all of that happen. I'm sure what's going to happen is I'm going to walk out of here and think of like 10 really funny stories, and I've got nothing right now. But those are some things that stand out to me as cool moments.
Cool.
Yeah.
Kite my good friend Kite has asked, he really wants to know, would you rather fight one Zaitan-sized Quaggan or 100 Quaggan-sized Zaitans?
Wow. I think if nothing else, just for the sheer impressive size of it, it would be awesome to see one Zaitan-sized Quaggan. I have an immediate mental image of the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man in Ghostbusters just like stomping down the street. And how better for us to blow up Lion's Arch one more time than to send a giant Quaggan who storms through the streets and steps on everything. And the noise that thing would make from like a mile away, you would hear, "Ooh," and literally the ground shaking from it making that noise. That'd be amazing. Both would be equally terrifying, but I think just from the sheer spectacle alone, that would be worth it.
I have to agree. Thank you so much for everything. And thank you guys for submitting questions. See you next time.
Right.
Bye.